Welcome to Fintech Daydreaming, the podcast that dives into the world of banking technologies and the ever-changing landscape of fintech companies. We bring you real-life examples from global and local thought leaders, as well as experts working within the financial industry, and seek out the best stories from the front lines of financial services innovation, where dreams of industry pioneers meet reality. Hosted by Paul Krogdahl and Ville Sontu. This is Fintech Daydreaming.
Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to another fantastic episode of Fintech Daydreaming. This is episode 2 of season 8. I can't believe yet again we've managed to get all this way to season 8. I make that sound almost like it's a bad thing, but it's fantastic. Villa and I have kept this going now for what is closing in on 4 years, and it still feels like something new, something exciting, something that really burns our passion. I am Paul Krogdahl. I'm going to be your host for this fantastic episode of Fintech Daydreaming. But as always, I cannot do this on my own. I rely on my fantastic friend and co-host, Villa. Villa, how are you, my friend?
I'm good as always, This time reporting to you from Sweden, where I'm traveling for business as usual. But again, this is going to be another office episode for me, but I think this should be working just fine.
You do travel an awful lot, and I think it's becoming a part of the podcast now. Where is Villa this week? So maybe we should keep that going, and in future not actually announce where you are and let people try and guess where you potentially might have been in that episode. Start having some, clues behind you for people to make a guess. Almost make it invisible, right? Make it invisible as to where you are, and that brings us nicely into this episode where we're going to be talking about invisible banking. And I've been asked by people, what is invisible banking, Paul? Well, invisible banking is the evolution from where we used to be with open banking into embedded finance, and now into this full notion of banking becoming completely invisible to the consumers, to us as users of the banks. It becomes almost ingrained, sewn into the journeys that we make on a daily basis. We unconsciously start doing banking. We unconsciously do our payments. Not too unconsciously, because obviously we want to know where our money is and what we're doing with our money. But if we think about an Uber ride, we get out the Uber taxi, close the door, and we automatically pay. It gets done for us. We've done some stuff to set that up, but you start to get the notion of what is invisible banking. And with us today, we've got a fantastic guest. We've got Sudip that's joining us, who has been spearheading an awful lot of the activities in one of the large banks in Europe around open banking, banking platforms, and invisible banking. Sudip, it's fantastic to have you here with us today. Maybe for some of the few people out there that don't know you, who is Sudip and what is your
Sure thing. What is my superpower? I don't have many, but let me give it a shot. Give you a quick intro about myself. My name is Sudip Khan. I wouldn't say I have a superpower, but I am a sucker for all things related to innovation, open banking, embedded finance, and as you said, right now I'm the open banking leader at the Raiffeisen Bank International over here in Vienna, Austria, where I lead the business side of things of a 30-member team. And what we're trying to do is use the efforts that we had put into becoming regulatory compliant with PSD2, so the whole open banking story, and then figuring out how do we try and make this profitable. So we're doing this by shifting our focus to embedded banking, where we establish new revenue streams through new distribution channels. And before this, I was actually, as you can probably tell by my accent, I was living in the States for a while in Atlanta, Georgia, where I was managing innovation projects at the company called NCR, working on a lot of stuff out there that kind of revolved around R&D in the banking space. And I've also done some project management work with WorldPay, where we were working with strategic partners, so it was more like embedded payments at that time. where I had an absolute blast. And prior to that, I was actually working at banks. So I went from banks to tech to back to a bank. And in the banking area, I was more so in the retail as I am right now as well, working in various different capacities in business analysis, AML, managing branches. Actually, I was actually in retail branches at SunTrust, JP Morgan, Washington Mutual. And yeah, maybe I rambled a little bit about myself there, but I'm very excited to be over here and looking forward to a lively discussion.
No, it's a fantastically good rounded introduction there. Sorry, Villa, what did you want to say?
I just wanted to make a note that many of us say that we are recovering bankers, but you sound to be like a relapsed banker because you went back to a bank. But yeah,
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Villa. I'm relapsed. Yeah, I've relapsed. That's I don't even know how to say that in any better way. It's definitely a different world being in a bank and in a tech company. It's two completely different cultures, and I think that's what we'll talk about today as well.
Although some of those lines are starting to blur. I mean, Villa and I just had the last episode talking to Audax, who is a banking as a platform or banking as a service provider, and they are an IT company working in the banking space. And we're starting to see an awful lot of this, IT companies becoming banks, more so than the old traditional banks saying we're an IT company with a banking license, which I think, if we're really honest, they're still really operating as a bank more than an IT company. But I'm actually going to do you a favor, Sudip. I'm going to give you one of what I feel is a superpower, and full transparency here. Villa and I had the utmost pleasure for season 7 to do a live episode from the Moby Forum member meeting in Vienna. And that's where I first time met you, Sudip. And you did a presentation on not just open banking, but more on embedded finance and the wider scope of open banking. And you blew me away. That was such a fantastic presentation. So I would actually say that your superpower isn't just being able to find the right words to describe what open banking is and the direction that you are going in, but also you've got a wealth of experience and knowledge deeply embedded into this domain. And I'm really looking forward to this episode and these discussions with you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for the kind words.
No, absolutely. But we want to sort of jump off to one side. I do it at the beginning. Villa does it at the end. It doesn't really matter where it happens in the episode, but we cannot do an episode without a really, really bad joke. And so, Sudip, do you by any chance happen to have a joke you want to share with our listeners?
I do have something that I could share with you guys, and I think it will hit or check the mark of really bad as well. So I'll have at least accomplished something on this podcast. But here goes. So as you guys know, I've worked in retail branches before, and we used to have high school interns that used to come and work in our branches. So this is kind of along those themes, along that theme rather. So there's this brand spanking new high school intern that works at a branch, right? And it's his first day on the job, and he's super excited and fired up about starting his new career. And then his first customer walks in, right? And it's this classical, adorable little old grandma, right? And she's in the branch, and as usual, doesn't use internet banking, doesn't use mobile banking. She just wants to check her balance. But the intern gets a little confused by what grandma is asking for, and she's like, ma'am, I don't think I can help you with that. And not realizing he's an intern, the grandma kind of loses it and goes, young man, are you giving me lip? And the poor intern's like trying to avoid a customer service disaster. And she's like, no, I just don't think I'm the go-to guy for this. But she's still taking none of it. So she's like asking to speak to the manager. And so finally the intern, feeling the pressure from this little old grandma, is like, all right. I'll go ahead and check your balance for you. But then in a grand mix up of things, he walks close to her, pushes her over, and she falls tumbling to the ground. And that, my friends, is the reason why you shouldn't mix up balances when you're talking about banking. So yes, put some effort into that. Probably the worst one you've heard so far, but at least it was
Not
somewhat
even the worst.
elaborate.
No, we've heard worse. We have heard worse. That one's good. And the delivery, it actually, strengthens what I said earlier. The delivery you did of your presentation at the Moby Forum was exactly like this. And for any of our listeners out there, if you get a chance to go and watch a presentation that Sudip gives in the future, I would strongly recommend it. He's even actually better than me at presenting, and that's saying something.
I wouldn't go that far, but again, appreciate it very much. Look, if I may ride that train a little bit, one thing that's really important to me is to try and say things in a way that's understandable, right? I mean, you'll notice that in this conversation, or even in previous conversations that you've had with me, I don't try to get too technical about things. At the end of the day, it's I think banking is about it's a lot about emotions and being there at the right time for life journeys and those emotions that are involved with it. So I try to relay it in exactly those kind of words, simple words that is understandable to everybody.
I think that's spot on and exactly what we want here on the podcast. So with that, let's dive into this journey of invisible banking. I mean, let's start with culture and the need for collaboration within sort of a bank. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about invisible banking, this is a foundational paradigm shift for most banks, particularly old banks that are used to operating in the traditional banking business models. So, I mean, in the journey towards invisible banking, how can financial institutions effectively transition from traditional hierarchical structures that they're also used to fostering a more culture of collaboration and innovation? I mean, what are the key drivers and challenges in reshaping company cultures to break down these silos and embracing a, can I say, cross-functional collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, a good question here, and something that, like I say, is very near and dear to me. It's got especially to do with the fact that I've worked in different countries, different companies, different industries, predominantly banking and tech, and I've seen a huge cultural difference there, and especially being in the innovations field as well. I've really noticed these differences. And look, shifting to an innovation culture is essentially like wearing your empathy hat all the time, yeah? And that shows up big time when or how we connect with our customers, and it's the culture that you have is naturally going to spill over to how we roll with our clients. So if we have this kind of tight culture in the company, the customer is going to feel that as well. And therefore, culture is really important. Showing empathy is really important. And because that is what provides more juice in the tank, if you will, for engagement. So, some people, especially in traditional banks, kind of brush this off as all soft and fuzzy. And I'm convinced, though, that boosting empathy within your company or within the bank is really the secret sauce that gets things going. If we've got our work environment all sorted out and kind of comfortable, that's when the empathy really starts to fly off internally. And as employees, we need to have our glasses full to the brim in order to be able to overflow and give it to our customers as well. Because when you feel the love, that's when it's easier to share the love as well with our customers. So happy employees make happy customers is the bottom line over here. And I think all of this really comes down from the top down, right? It has to start at the tippy top, where the leaders should be setting examples by demonstrating empathy in their interactions with both employees and customers. And it will naturally create this cultural expectation of employees to do the same all the time. And then you need employee feedback. So once again, first you really got to start with the employees. You've really got to take care of them. Really got to make sure that they're at a place where they feel good about what they're doing, They have some purpose. They're taken care of in their personal lives as well. They feel that they're working in a collaborative environment. They have time for self-care, and the company's even providing them all the things that they need for that. And then I think from that you get the side effects of it, which is the great customer service that you provide. And there are a few different tools that you can use to get this stuff started, right? One of the things actually that's really big for me personally, and this goes back to what I was saying as far as working in branches before, and working with customers face to face. Like I've stood in front of customers, sat in front of customers, yelling at me, telling me why they hate us. I mean, this is back in 2008, so you can imagine it was pretty intense at the time. But from those interactions, I think I learned something that shaped me for the rest of my life. It's really trying to understand what their pain points are, empathize with them, really take ownership of their issues too, and try to solve it for them. And then some other things that you could do. So that would be like, what I would do there would be to allow employees to shadow people with real customers. Mm-hmm. So have some sort of rotational program where you actually send out someone to a branch or someone to work with a business customer or whatever it might be. At NCR, we had this program called where we were shadowing. They call the technicians. So the technicians that were servicing the ATMs for NCR would have direct contact with the customers, and it was required when you joined the job that you would have to go on a rotation with one of these technicians to a customer. And the idea was that you go out there and you really see what the customer interactions are like. And then again, rambling a little bit, the only thing that I'd add is that I think is extremely important is this whole idea of diversity and inclusion. If you prioritize diversity and inclusion within your workforce, I think you really attract all sorts of different types of people, and there's a better understanding then that develops over time of different mindsets and different ideas, different cultures, different backgrounds. So I think having a very strong diversity and inclusion program within a company is also extremely important.
That's a lot of fascinating perspectives there. I just noticed something as well, which I don't sure if it's a coincidence, that in the previous episode we talked to Kelvin, and he talked a lot about how listening is so important. Listening to your customers, also listening to other people, your peers, and inside and outside your organization. And he was hoping that people would do more listening. To me, that is almost connected to the empathy point that you made, and maybe we're reaching some kind of a theme here for this for this season. Is that it is not about that much about the technology. It's really about how to work together and listen and hear what other people are talking about. So I think
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think so. There's two streams here, really, right? So it's one is about listening to your customer. And having the right infrastructure, if you will, for lack of better words, the right tools in place to be able to gather that feedback and disseminate it within the company effectively so that everybody knows that, okay, we changed this and this is what the impact was of it, and here's like 10 customer reviews about it. So making it really real about the changes, the things that you're working on day to day and how it's affecting the customer. And then you've got the employee side as well. So it's extremely important to listen to what the employees are saying, because you want to make sure that the employees are feeling really good too, and not just feeling really good and to be able to do their jobs in a kind of happy, honky-dory way, but also to be able to create a safe space so that when it comes to innovation, like you mentioned, Paul, you don't feel judged when you come with an idea, and you don't feel attacked right away when that idea is something crazy, like I kind of talk about all the time. I'm basically trying to tell people within the company, hey, we need to become a software company, and they just think, okay, this guy's crazy. I'm not going to talk to this guy, right? But I mean, like I say, I've seen it happen. You know, NCR actually, the last company that I worked for, they just recently now split into two companies. They were historically a hardware company that was doing ATMs, point of sales, and now they've split into a software side and a hardware side. And my assumption is they're going to spin off the hardware piece of it. And software is really the way to go because you want to have this reoccurring revenue. You want to be able to deliver things there are higher margins there. Essentially, that's where you want to be. So yeah, creating that safe space is also extremely important.
It's interesting. You know, everything you've just outlined there is super critical, and it's part of the discussion that I have with an awful lot of banks that are starting to try and go on this journey around embedded finance and invisible banking, because the starting point tends to be banks saying, well, this is just another channel for my existing products, right? And the first thing I say to them is, no, it's not. You need to think about your customer journeys, because you're no longer going to be the direct face to that customer. You're going to be embedded into their journeys. You need to think about where they are. You need to think about what they are doing. You need to think about their outcomes a lot more than thinking about the output that you're giving to them. And everything that you've just highlighted and pulled out there are really, really key, important parts that any financial institution needs to think about and detail and do an awful lot of workshopping and everything else around to start to actually identify how they're going to engage into this whole new platform economy, how they're going to drive embedded finance, how they're going to continue to supply not only just value to a growing ecosystem, but for themselves to continue to stay relevant. And this must have been, you know, one of the key elements that drove success for you in your current role as, you know, open banking leader. How did you manage to sort of drive this to success?
I think so. I don't know how much. I don't want to inflate my own head over here and say that we've created a lot of success. But you know, I think we've been able to prove a few things, if you will. We did not too long ago with our API marketplace, which is essentially our dev portal where all our APIs sit right now. We got recognized for being the masters of openness in InnoPay's yearly open banking monitor. So that was a huge success that I credit to the team. But I think you know, again, it goes back to this idea of creating that safe space for people to be able to share their ideas openly. So it's not so much of a hierarchical style of management anymore, but you've got the people who are on the ground who understand what's happening, make the suggestions, and then actually you know, figure it out themselves and figure out how they can bring it out to market so that the customers can enjoy the new features and services or whatever it is that they're building. And I think for my role there was more so the communication piece. Yeah, so it's about trying to be the champion of the vision. So it's really trying to make it crystal clear to the team. Okay, this is how I see the future. This is how all of these things are going to interact with each other. So you know, I dream of a future where you can go to your Google Assistant. I'm a Google fanboy, by the way. You go to your Google Assistant and you start saying things that, you know, I want to do. Oh, I hope my Google doesn't activate now, by the way. But you say something like, yeah, I want to do, I don't know, transfer money from account A to account B, and it does it for you, right? Or, you know, you're driving your car and you can order a pizza and it's already done the payment and etc. That's the type of future that I imagine, and I try to kind of picture or draw out for my team. I try to show how the things that they're working on fits in with that picture of my future. And that makes it more relatable to them. And that's really how things move ahead, I think, in the team. And it doesn't happen all in one go. You've got some of the team is going to be on board right away. Some of them are going to be skeptics, and they skeptical rather, and they say, this is just pipe dreams. Come back to us when this is actually really happening. I've heard about this sort of stuff for years and years. But and then there are others that are more enthusiastic, and they're on the bandwagon right away. So it's repeating that message over and over again. Then also letting them ideate, come up with these interesting ideas, and do some knowledge sharing, and also encourage how we can talk to other teams within the company. So to learn and also educate at the same time other teams. So we're the open banking team, but talking to, let's say, trade finance, or talking to the SME lending team, and telling them how our work kind of touches theirs, and also learning from them how their stuff works. Yeah. That helps a lot with the innovation process and coming up with new ways of doing things. And then celebrating, right? So we've got to, before that, having a good set of metrics, which also encourages this collaboration, so that, we are not just as a team working towards the same thing, but as a company across different departments working towards the same thing. And then once you've achieved all those successes, like you said, Paul, then we can go ahead and celebrate. And again, I'm going to bring out another example from my previous job, which was a tech company. Is we had something called Fun Thursdays. And essentially, Fun Thursdays was this idea that originated in the NCR offices in Japan. And the CEO was out there on a tour, and he came back, and he said, "Oh, that was such a great idea." And what it was that the CEO and the entire C-suite, and NCR is a 30,000 employee company, it's huge, right? Mm. The C-suite of the company would pour drinks for us every Thursday, and it was an opportunity for us in such a huge organization to be able to have some sort of chit chat with the C-suite. So you would be pitching ideas while you're waiting on your beer, on your craft beer, and the CEO himself or herself, depending on where you are, would be able to say, "Hey, I know so-and-so who might be interested in what you're talking about. Let me connect you guys." And that just sidesteps all these little hierarchical, silos that you've got. And it really, makes things a lot faster.
You're actually making me think an awful lot again around, what you're talking about is rooted in culture and empathy, very much like you said right at the beginning of the discussion. And I'm finding an awful lot of banks, in actual fact, I would say an awful lot of large organizations struggle with this, in going from, we've got a great new idea, this innovation and everything else, back into the bank and making it actually part of real life, executing on it. We've seen an awful lot of banks in the past setting up innovation teams that almost sit in a different building with their bean bags and everything else. They have great ideas, but there's no way of getting those ideas back into the organization. Even when you're looking at open banking, I mean, like I said, I've spoken to banks around open banking where you end up in the same dilemma, because the open banking team needs to try and get the rest of the bank along to try and think about new ways of bringing revenue channels, new products to be able to make available through external APIs. And I think there is, unfortunately, there is a disconnect in a lot of banks on actually being successful with this. And you spoke about this in the last episode, Villa, where you talked about the fact that rigidity in banks are by design, it's not a bug. And I'm wondering whether that rigidity is part of the problem that's prevented a lot of banks from being very successful. Now, you've been successful, Sudip, with this. Villa, you've worked in some banks and also outside of some banks. What's your view, Villa?
I think the fundamental problem is, well, it's the rigidity, which is part of as designed, but more than that, I mean, I think everybody of us working in banks who have been working for banks don't by default say no to new ideas. But the problem is that for most people who are actually owners of their business lines that they are representing, their KPIs are not aligned with this new innovation. The question that will always come back is that how will this help my KPIs and performance indicators for this quarter? Yeah. If you then say that no, but if you invest in now, you could be more profitable in 2-3 years, then you end up in this endless dilemma that you're still not aligned with the immediate goals of that business unit that would help them look better. So in my mind, and we've been discussing this in the podcast as well many times, I think, like Sudip also said, it needs to come from the top. I think this reinventing your business and making sure it grows in the long term and investing the right amount into future things is critical to long-term success. Unfortunately, many banks and even larger organizations in general don't see this, so they only look at the immediate return on investment. And I think that is the other part of the problem, the rigidity to be more slow in terms of new innovation is also part of it. But I think this other KPI related topic is equally big.
You guys talk about rigidity, and I think you guys have struck something there, because and I think, like you guys mentioned in the last podcast too, it was mentioned. Look, I think just like you said, it's by design, right? So we are, at the end of the day, as a bank, we're supposed to be managing risk. And what does that mean? It means, really scrutinizing something to the point where you say, I can or cannot do this, but you really tear something apart. And if we continue that habit in this rapidly changing environment, where you've got all these different fintechs that are coming about with really great ideas, and they're actually able to implement them due to the fact that we've got regulation coming, which is opening our tool sets up that we have as banks, our data up really, you won't be able to keep up. You've got to change the mentality, the mindset within this traditional organization to match that of a fintech. And as crazy as it sounds, I think it is possible. And I say that confidently because I've seen it happen. And we've got to get away from this idea that we have to get into the idea of experimenting and understanding our customers, really believing in innovation. I think we should be celebrating innovation. So if you have an innovation team, you shouldn't be putting them in a different building. You should be celebrating them as the superheroes and trying to put them on a pedestal, really, so that others see and understand that, okay, this is the way that we should be. This is what the top leadership wants us to be like, right? And the top leadership should also be collaborating with each other. So you've got silos between, let's say, your corporate division and your retail division and your investments division. What if the responsibles, the guys at the top, they start collaborating and they start celebrating their successes together? Then all that really comes down, because if you set that example that that's how it's supposed to be, then naturally the folks in your organization are going to start behaving in a similar way as well. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of work to be done to change things. However, with that said, and I hope I don't offend anybody by saying this, like, and I include myself into this mix, right? I'm also somewhat, I'm a middle-aged man, right? So I've had my experiences. I've been through life to a certain extent. To shape and mold me is much harder than to shape someone who is straight out of college, right? So I think it's important that we bring in young talent as well and show them what this new culture is about, so that they can really champion it. Because it's one thing for an old fart like myself to go around and saying, oh yeah, you party and this and that, but I can't really keep up with the young guns. So yeah, I think it's better. So you should have a solid an internship program or a student program where they're celebrated too. And again, putting them up on a pedestal and teaching them the right way of doing things, not trying to teach them the old way of doing things, really kind of keeping them isolated from the traditional side of the bank, and then creating this new culture from within. I think that's also important.
First of all, I'll protest. You look way too young to be middle-aged, but you're not grey like me or Villa, so you've still got
Hey.
some way to go, I'm afraid. So don't come on here, start talking about middle-aged, okay?
But in defense,
Thank you.
middle-aged people, I think the young people's enthusiasm is of course something to embrace, but we should also remember that the wisdom that age brings and experience brings is also important. So while we of course understand that when you get older, you get more conservative and you want to change less and less things, but how do we combine this enthusiasm, blue-eyed, moving forward energy, and then the wisdom and experience that people like us might have in certain circumstances?
You know what I've seen in previous organizations is that there was, to at least what I saw was there was a tipping point. Yeah, so there was every year we had a whole bunch of new people coming in straight out of college, super enthusiastic, extra energized, and then the company would invest a lot in them, and they would be sitting with the more the wiser folks, as you're putting it, and kind of feed off of them and learn what they do. And then what you notice, what I noticed rather was that in the beginning there was a little bit of a pushback from the guys that were there for a while. But then, like I was saying, once you see that this is what the leadership is kind of pushing for, this is the new culture, and there are all these people that are super enthusiastic and energetic and really pushing this new culture. At some point, there's this shift where even the old guys, senior guys, experienced, seasoned, I think seasoned is the best word, seasoned guys then suddenly flip as well, and they say, oh, this is actually cool. I should be part of this too. And yeah, let's try and experiment, and let's do fun stuff, and let's have fun coming to work and that kind of stuff. So I think that you're absolutely right, Rilla. There's this, you need to have the wisdom of the experienced folks. But I think you can also change the mindset of the more seasoned folks by having that point of I think it's the chasm is what the word I'm looking for, where it suddenly changes over, and you see even the more seasoned people or experienced people are now starting to talk about crazy ideas and changing the world.
Yeah, I think it's another example of how diversity actually works in these environments, because diversity also in terms of what age group are you in and how experienced you are is also important.
100%. Yeah.
I'd like to pull us back on track.
Sorry.
We're supposed to be talking about invisible banking, embedded finance, open banking, and not so much about middle-aged men trying to learn new tricks. Although that also possibly could be an interesting episode for us to have in the future sometime, Villa. But going right back down into the world of open banking, embedded finance, you gave some great examples there, Sudip, a minute ago. Around sitting in the car ordering a pizza, the pizza is all done, etc. In your mind, do you have any great examples of well executed embedded finance, invisible banking? What sticks out to you as that's the way you do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the go-to for everyone is always Uber, right? It's come to the point now where, I mean, I literally took an Uber on the weekend. I was at a music festival, Villa. So I didn't drive for obvious reasons, and I was taking an Uber back, and I was just thinking to myself, like, afterwards, I was thinking to myself, I didn't do anything. I just stepped in the car. It took me somewhere, and I stepped out, and there it was. I was done, right? And I think that those are the type of experiences that we are getting more and more used to. But I think what's really going to, I think where it really starts getting super interesting is when all of the financial services that we consume are actually embedded rather in the digital platforms that we use on a day-to-day basis. So like I said earlier, and you also use this example as well to kind of shape this question, is that I'm a Google guy, and then you've got Apple people, you've got folks that love their Samsung ecosystem. I've got everything in my house is based on Google. I've got Google Nest cameras, I've got the thermostat, I've got the lights, you name it. And I like to be able to have everything in one place. So I love to be able to, say something to Google and it just does it for me. And I think this will really be a game changer once you've got all the financial services also built into these kind of assistants and other platforms that we use. So for example, I might wake up in the morning and my assistant, my virtual assistant's already telling me, you've got this much money, you spent this over there, you better watch out, you better do this, you better do that. Things that I don't really want to think about. Things that I'd rather have, somebody else taking care of and telling me every now and then, and giving me that intelligent, invisible advice as to what I should be doing. So all in the space of the PFM space, I think is really going to be the biggest game changer. But I think the technology really needs to, and the banks, the companies need to, the industry needs to catch up with the technology that's out there. So the use of AI and the use of APIs and being able to connect all the different worlds together, just like Uber did with Google, with their map service, with their communication service, with their payment service. All of it is just plugged together and connected together so that it also just seems seamless. And the same thing will go, I think, once you get to this idea of intelligent PFMs, where it's telling you what to do, it's telling you where to put your money. Oh, put it in Bitcoin today and take it out tomorrow, whatever it might be. Those decisions, I think, once we get to that point where these platforms or the bank or the financial services in the background are making those decisions for us, I think that's going to be a huge game changer.
One of the things that we've spoken an awful lot about is open banking, embedded finance, invisible banking, whatever label we want to put on it, depending upon the scope we're putting into this discussion. But predominantly we've spoken about it from a consumer perspective, bank to consumer. I'm wondering, do we think that we are heading towards a place where the focus is shifting and it's becoming more of a business to business discussion, or even a business to consumer, so that the banks start seeing their critical client base actually being not the end consumer, but the platforms that they're embedding themselves into, or the organizations that they are embedding themselves into? Do you see this shift happening from your perspective, Sudip?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, so I'm going to speak about it from a retail perspective over here, because I think traditionally we have always had this B2C model where we're directly dealing with the end customer. And for us, it's a huge mindset shift to think that there's someone else in between. And there's a little bit of a fear that, we're going to lose that relationship with that end customer. But I think it's important that we start understanding that our new customers of the future are actually those businesses that have their closed user groups that we're selling to. So you need to have those contextual products to be able to offer to those businesses who can then sell your product further. And you've got to understand those customers then, and those new customers, those businesses, those distribution partners. And in order to do that, you've got to find out what their motives might be to help you in this journey. And so monetization becomes really important, monetization opportunities for them. So you better have a very good revenue sharing plan for them. You better have a good training program for them so that they understand what your product is about, or how to sell it, right? Because they are now selling your product for you. You need to have a good marketing program in place where it's co-branded marketing together with that third-party distributor, and you're essentially helping their marketing division, which might never have done banking solutions in the past, to show them, okay, this is how you sell a banking product, right? But to go maybe a bit more in the technical space, it also is a matter of being very developer centric, right? To be able to have tools and solutions in place that the developers can reach out to and use very easily. So having, like we have, an API marketplace, and then also being able to let's have a sandbox or a testing environment in there where you can, as a developer, as a third-party developer, go in and play around and mess around in the bank's kitchen, if you will, without messing up any of the stuff that's around there. And creating that safe zone for that third party to work in, and also in that same instance, being able to give them some advice or education on the hurdles that we face as a bank, right? So we've got regulatory compliance issues, a whole bunch of them that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, which is why we are so stodgy and kind of grumpy and whatnot. So the best way to do that is to say, okay, here's the reason why. I just want you to understand this is why we are the way we are, and so that they understand how to navigate that environment as well. You really need to nurture these partnerships with third parties, and be involved in the communities, and really get your word out there as to what you have available and why yours is better than others. And if we're talking about startups, which in today's world, I think that's what we're seeing most of in the fintech space. If you can also have some sort of incubation program, that helps too. I'm a fan of, or I've recently started exploring something called a startup studio. Mm-hmm. This is where the investing entity, I don't want to call it a VC, but whoever's investing has a much more equity into that startup, and therefore also has a lot more personal ownership, and tries to make sure that startup does well, right? So they'll put in more employees or in there. They'll make use of their own marketing teams, their own regulatory teams, to try and really build up this startup. Yeah. So yeah, all of this to say that you've got to have the right tools from a technical perspective, but also just from a relationship perspective as well, with third parties to do business with.
And with that, I'm unfortunately going to say we're running out of time. It tends to happen very quickly. We get into these discussions. I have, at least my brain is going, I've got so many other questions I want to ask you around, how banks continue to stay relevant when they become invisible and everything else. But we're running out of time. And I even had a good question there associated with telco that I wanted to ask to you, Ville, but time has run out on us. And I think we need to hold these questions back to a future episode, a future discussion, but I don't want to stop us completely dead, Sudip. So is there any critical point that you feel you really wanted to get across to our listeners that we haven't talked about so far today?
Nothing new really, other than, this is a huge mindset shift for financial institutions in general. And it starts from the very top, and it starts with a cultural change. Yes, there's a huge technology component towards it, moving things to the cloud, being API first, allowing for that ease of integration, and obviously all the security aspects that are involved as well. Yeah. But it really has to start with culture and mindsets, because you can't do all these other changes if you don't have the right mindset. Otherwise, it's just going to follow the same culture that we had before, which is the person at the top just says, you do this, and then you do it, right? It's this hierarchical structure. So that would be my only message, is we need to change our mindsets.
Fantastic. Any last words from you, Villa?
No, just that I would have loved to continue the conversation for another hour at least to talk about things like what does trust look like in this new ecosystem of intermediaries in embedded finance and invisible banking. But unfortunately, like you said, Paul, we have to leave those for future episodes for more interesting discussions.
Absolutely. It's time to wrap up. Sudip, thank you so much for joining us on Fintech Daydreaming. If our listeners want to know more, want to continue the discussion with you, how can they find you, reach you, and get in touch?
Two places really. So one is the RBI API Marketplace. Go to api.rbiinternational.com, and obviously LinkedIn as well. You can find me with the name Sudip Khan.
Fantastic. Thank you. And also to all you adorable, fantastic, lovely listeners out there, it is so fantastic to have you join us, listen to us, watch our YouTube videos, leave your comments, your thumbs up, your thumbs down, whatever the case may be. But the most important thing is hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and on YouTube, hit the bell so that you get notified when a new episode comes out. We try to, in fact, I would say we do. We're very, very good on our timing here. So every fortnight, we come out with a new episode, except for when we take a small vacation during the summer or during the winter. I would also like to say, specifically for this episode, we're not sponsored by Google. But Google, if you do want to sponsor us, please reach out and let us know, because I think Sudip has done a fantastically good job on singing how wonderful you are through this episode. With that, my dear friends, we have come to the end of another episode. This has been Fintech Daydreaming.
This is Fintech Daydreaming.